Now, if there's one thing many Power Rangers fans kinda notice, is that the anniversary seasons kinda suck. Now, sure, the crossover episodes are pretty awesome, Forever Ed being the best in my opinion, but the seasons themselves are Like Ninja Steel was a bit of a letdown compared to his predecessor, Dino Charge. And Operation Overdrive, while going through the late Disney era, has some really poor slow motion action. Wild Force stuck too closely to the Sentai, and did not have the same magic Time Force did. But the worst had to be Super Mega Force, which was just a choppy mess. Even if you go super far, the 5th season was pretty odd too, where it started as a movie in theaters, but for some reason started to remove everything from the old cast like string cheese. Even the main characters were replaced midway. Yeah, it's a pretty odd trend. But it doesn't make those seasons automatically bad. I even enjoyed some of them. And I even had happy memories of them when I was younger. But don't worry, a better season usually airs in its place, so there's that. So I guess it's partially why I sort of avoided the infamous video game that came out. During the 15th season of Power Rangers called Power Rangers Super Legends, made for the PS2, Nintendo DS, and PC, which was a crossover with many of the Power Rangers seasons during the time. And it didn't help that this was during the time of the late Disney era, where the show wasn't that popular for mainstream audiences, and felt mostly ignored. This is before they started to remarket Season 1. But hey, that neglect did do some good, because RPM was pretty much, look, here's your Sentai, do whatever you want, no one watches the show anyways. And that led to a pretty creative season where they killed off half the population, and did tributes to many action movies like Mad Max. So, anyways, how was Super Legends? Was it any good? Does it still hold up? Well, let's find out. Our story takes place in the farther future, I guess 2050, I suppose, where the Omega Ranger takes on an army of monsters in the Power Rangers Hall of Legends, led by Lord Zed, one of the original villains from Power Rangers, which I guess is fitting for a game like this. We last saw him in the Countdown to Destruction finale, where it revealed that he and many of the other Zordon-era villains were actually good people corrupted by evil. So it's like what happened to Tommy, but more extreme. Though I imagine through different methods. Like Divatox looks stunning, meanwhile Lord Zed has his skin peeled off. What, did he open the Hellraiser box? What the hell happened to him? And honestly, his design is just more grosser the more I think about it. If they really were trying to scare children, then they did a good job at it. And while it may sound generic, Zed and Rita were actually one of the better villains looking back. They actually had a lot of good W's against the Power Rangers, and even retooled some of their old plans. Now sure, it might have been laziness on the creator's part, but it does get the feel of confidence. Like, okay, let's do what we did last time, but let's not suck at it. Lord Zed messes around in different eras. Well, specifically from the 90s and early 2000s. So he could take over the world from day one. Crossing over with the original Power Rangers, the Thunder Rangers from Ninja Storm, the Lost Galaxy Rangers, who I don't think are even on Earth. And what happened to his neck? Operation Overdrive, and the future of SPD. Well, the future that is only 3 years from now. Omega recruits the Rangers together to defeat Zed. However, he can only take 2 Rangers at a time. I like how they acknowledge the limitation of the story. And that's really it. There's not really a lot of plot in this game. Main appeal for this is the gameplay, which is a basic side-scrolling beat-em-up. The game relies on you to use different combos to properly get through the stage, so cheesing it and just button mashing isn't going to work. However, all the characters have the exact same controls and models, so everyone plays the same. There's even a button that allows you to use a blaster, and they'll give you a generic one if the Ranger didn't have one in the first place. You also cannot use swords, which is pretty frustrating. Like, what's the point of getting the Omega Ranger Katana if you can't use it? And part of the appeal of Shadow Ranger is, well, he has a cool looking sword, and not, well, you know, a gun. Although there was that one time in Sentai where he did use it as a rifle somehow. Anyways, the gun kinda sucks because it has a cooldown if you use it too much. There's a variety of enemies. The lowest ones are your basic grunts that change depending on where you're at, so there's not really a difference. But then you'll encounter more video gamey henchmen. There's big dudes with cannons, these snipers that are weak but super annoying, and the later ones that can fly. For some reason you cannot shoot diagonally, so thankfully they're low on health. And there are certain times where you're forced to fight them to progress, and many of these areas will have some form of gimmicks to make things different. something that can help or be used against you. My favorite is when you fight them on the streets, where they can be killed not by the Power Rangers, but the people in the city. It is hilarious. Who needs Power Rangers when you could run them over? The levels themselves are also huge collectathons, with so many different scenes for you to collect, and being awarded a simple JPEG or a new ranger to play as. However, they can really drag on, and I think most of these levels are almost a half hour to complete. Mighty Morphin, Galaxy, SPD, and Ninja Storm get 2 levels each, while Overdrive only has 1, and the final stage is the Omega Ring. You fight a boss fight at the end of each level. And oddly enough, it actually benefits you to get hurt, as some of these bosses will stop their attack to laugh at you, which makes them open for you to attack. Sometimes you can even daze them and get more hits, but they're immune to bullets for some reason. After you beat the section, you get to play as the Megazords. Megazords in Power Ranger games are radically different depending on the game, and this is one of the more cheaper ones where it's purely QTE. There's worse. Though sometimes I accidentally mash when I was supposed to be doing a sequence. So, is that it? Kinda. There's not really much other than that. And people were a bit upset that there's not more. Like, people wanted more characters, or more seasons to base off, like Space, Zeo, Dino Thunder. Given how small the game is, I actually think it is too much to ask. There's no Tommy, Andros, Ryan, or even the Phantom Ranger. Though I don't think none of that actually matters. For one, all the characters stay in their suits, and they don't remove their helmets. And none of the actors even return. So there's the awkward moment the Power Rangers are voiced by well-known voice actors, like the guy from Uncharted, the guy who did Cowboy Bebop, or the guy who did Sasuke from Naruto. But it does kinda shallow the fan service a bit. But there's other moments like making Trakina a main villain, one of the better characters from Lost Galaxy. And I think they allow you to play as Jason. I think. But wait. You collect the White Ranger coins throughout the level, so it has to be Rocky, right? Since Jason only had a few episodes with Tommy as a White Ranger. But hold up, they also used the original Megazords, so it must be Jason. But they used the Thunder Megazords before the White Ranger And wait, what about Trakina? Her bug form does not have a visor. In the PC version, the SPD monster grows, but in this season specifically, the enemies use his mechs. It's like they watched the show, but didn't watch the show. Okay, I'm mostly joking. I'll stop sounding like an ass.
Anyway, when I opened it up and I started looking at the things, I was offended. Not by the childish activities and such they had in here, but honestly because of just Hasbro's inability to actually market to its true, demographic.
One bit of fan service I was a little disappointed was Sam. You see, SPD is a beloved season. Well, apparently, I remember a lot of people hating it when it came out. Sam was a kid character from one of the two-parters, but he later comes back from the future to aid the Rangers. So he's like Trunks, but he kinda sucks, because it's also an excuse to turn him into a ball of light. Due to some mishandling of the budget, I suppose. One of the stronger points of SPD was his characters, so it was really disappointing that the 6th Ranger doesn't even interact with the main team at all. The black spot of what could have been a better season. Due to how big a break was in the Sentai, he was one of the boys. While Kruger was more of a backup who occasionally joined in, but in Power Rangers SPD, it felt like the opposite. And making a future Omega Ranger is kinda silly, like he was already from the future in the first place. I also remember them using footage of Omega Ranger losing a lot. It's like if Trunks comes and kills Frieza, but loses every other time. Wait a minute, that sorta happens in Dragon Ball Z, you know what I mean. But I did kinda saw this as a way to fix that mistake by giving him more screen time or something. But original Omega Ranger only shows up near the end of the game, and he only gets used as a joke because there's 2 Omega Rangers walking around.
Way to put a wet blanket on things, Mr. Omega Ranger.
I'm sorry?
Not you!
Inability to actually market to its true, demographic.
After Zed is defeated, the Rangers go back to their original time, and forget everything to prevent retcons. Ironically, the continuity started to get less tight since Overdrive. The reason why Forever Red was hated by a certain point was because people were confused on how the powers came back, with people coming up with their own series or fan fiction, including from the actual director. And since Operation Overdrive, many of the powers are fixed by magic or something. So, I don't know, maybe Billy did something. There's a DS version, which from my experience is a weaker game. If anything, the gameplay is more boring. At least the gimmicks in the original try to spice things up. only thing that are of note is that there's a new Ranger that slightly resembles Nova Ranger instead of Future Omega. Time Force is also playable, which is fitting, and Boom actually gets a design as the Orange Ranger, but he only appears very briefly. See, our boy made it. You know, I think it would have been a better idea if he was Omega Ranger instead. Lots of good potential stories there. Out of all the seasons, SPD is the one that gets the most attention this game, despite being 2 seasons prior. Omega Ranger is prominent in the DS version, and instead of getting Grum or Broodwing, they get a one-off character related to Kruger's past. So I heard there was going to be a GameCube version and a Wii version that was cancelled. Now the Wii version makes sense, but GameCube? Operation Overdrive came out in 2007, and the GameCube did not have the same reputation as the PS2. I have a theory that Super Legend was going to be an SPD game, crossing over with other seasons, but was retooled for Operation Overdrive. Mystic Force is nowhere to be seen, and in the PS2 version, Operation Overdrive only has 1 level. Now, again, this is all a theory, and I could definitely be wrong on this, so don't take it as fact. Super Legends is a decent game. There is a limited amount of content, but it is a licensed game after all. But for a licensed game, it's average, which might be good enough depending on your viewer standards. Shortly after the RPM season, the one that killed half the population, Power Rangers was cancelled for a short period of time, which would later get a resurgence thanks to Saban and Nickelodeon. And Power Rangers have gained more popularity since. And later on, there's been another game similar to it called Battle of the Grid, where it was a fighting game that crosses over its many different seasons, as well as other characters from the movie and comics. So, in a way, Super Legends was the first of its kind.